key pillars. We must create an environment in which European industry can deliver state-of-the-art drones and counter-drone capabilities. We must urgently address supply chain dependencies. Today, around 60% of drone components come from the US or China, while critical raw materials are even more exposed. Strategic partnerships and stockpiles can be the answer. We need a fundamental overhaul of the EU defense funding instruments. Grants and financial envelopes must be more flexible, open to non-traditional vendors, and designed for a real operational impact and cost efficiency. Certification procedures and regulations must be adapted, not only to increase speed, but to ensure that SMEs, which are often at the technological forefront, are not blocked by outdated rules. We must invest in workforce and manufacturing capacity through open architectures and interoperability. EU-funded drone systems should follow open and modular standards, enabling plug-and-play components from multiple suppliers aligned with the NATO standards. Because drone technology evolves rapidly, those who protect us must always have access to the best available solutions. Procurement and sourcing must be adapted through pre-approved vendors, priority-rated orders, and regulatory fast-tracking, so drones and counter-drone systems can reach the field without delay. Cooperation is essential. NATO and the EU must work closely, fully exploiting their complementary roles in strengthening European defense and deterrence. The Commission should propose legally binding instruments to ensure NATO standards are followed. But everything mentioned before will be completely useless without people who know how to operate with all the systems our industry will deliver. We should also encourage Member States and Ukraine to jointly train and certify drone operators with standards equivalent to those of artillery or unmanned vehicle operators. Knowledge transfer between Ukraine, NATO and the EU must be institutionalized through staff exchanges and expanded joint training programs. And finally, we must be honest with ourselves. Technologies evolve fast, and no solution will ever make us 100% safe. This will always be a race between drones and counter-drones, and we will not always be ahead. That's why civil defense, shelters and protective infrastructure must be developed alongside with the revised civil preparedness strategy. Our citizens must know what to do and where to go in the event of the drone attacks. So, let's hope for the best, but be ready for the worst. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Potnaks. Now, for the Commission, Madam Mitsatu.
Thank you, honourable members. I thank Mr. Pozniak and the shadows for this important report and urgent call to action. Drone and counter-drone capacities are top Commission priorities. As the Commission and the HRVP presented in the Defence White Paper already 9 months ago and in the Defence Readiness Roadmap in October. The drone danger threatens all of Europe. It is part of the toolbox of hybrid warfare. And we've seen drone incursions and airspace violations in Poland, in the Baltic Seas, and also in Romania, the country that I know best. And we've seen drones disrupting airports all over Europe, drones threatening our critical infrastructure and EU's internal security. Russia and other malicious actors use drones to challenge our safety, our security, and our supply chains, and to test our defense readiness. They impact directly our citizens, for example, through spreading fear and through airport closures, and equally our economic actors, including critical entities. We must develop cutting-edge capacities to detect, to track, to identify, and to neutralize incoming drones. And we must use drones to deter and to defend. Learn from Ukraine, where drones halt the Russian advance on land and force the Russian Navy into its ports. Efficient drone defense needs integration and cooperation. On radar surveillance, on command and control. In short, EU added value. That's why already last October we proposed flagship defense projects, complementing the work of the European capability coalitions. Flagships will be led by member states with the support of the Commission and of the HRVP. The European Drone Defence Initiative, to develop multi-layered, technologically advanced and interoperable counter-drone capabilities. And at the Helsinki summit in December, member states took steps forward on the Eastern Flank Watch flagship project to guard the eastern border on land, in the air and at sea. Member states included drone and drone defense in their safe loan proposals. And €1 billion from the European Defence Fund is being used for drone and counter-drone prototypes. The new European Defence Industry Programme offers new money to de-risk investment and should be mobilized also in support of drone production. And EDIP will include measures to protect supply lines for crucial components. We strengthen supply lines also through the CHIPS Act, through STEP, and through the Critical Raw Materials Act. Drones, counter-drone systems, and other defense technology is evolving at an unprecedented speed. The battlefield is changing, and so must our defense industry. The EU Defence Innovation Scheme and the European Innovation Council, as well as the European Defence Hub for EU Defence Innovation, will continue supporting new defence actors so that we can develop drone and counter-drone technologies through the producer, developer, operator model. And we also set up the Tech Alliance, talented SMEs, startups, scale-ups that connect with member states. The first industry roundtable meeting was in November on drone defense. Also, we presented our European defense industry transformation roadmap to do more than build a better drone or a better tank, to build a better defense industry, a fully connected ecosystem linking innovators, industry to soldiers in the field. We must speed up, that is true. Our new pilot program, Agile, aims to cut development down to 6 to 12 months. We are learning from Ukraine. We have the most dynamic defense industry in Europe. In the Brave Tech EU initiative, sharing knowledge and linking EU to Ukrainian companies, and through the Drone Alliance that we are setting up with Ukraine. Also last week, we proposed €90 billion in loans for Ukraine. And I thank the Parliament for triggering the urgent procedure so that we can quickly get this to support Ukraine. Drones and their ecosystems offer opportunities not only for our defense, but also internal security, including border protection. In the face of recent incidents from drones against the security of critical infrastructures, there is a need to enhance the coordination, the ambition, and the visibility of our actions through a comprehensive approach. The Commission will soon come forward with an action plan which will cover the multidimensional aspects of drone and counter-drone capacity. Its objective will be to enhance EU's preparedness to prevent impactful incidents, to better detect malicious activities, and to deploy the right capacities so that we can respond faster to the threats. And drones also offer massive opportunities for our economies and for our societies. We already have one of the best legal frameworks for civil drones in the world. Last summer, 54 members of parliament asked us to make Europe a lead market on drones. And now we can make that happen. Because of dual use, what's good for civil drones will also be good for our defense. So let's work together so Europe can lead on drone industry and on drone defense for our benefit and for our protection. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Commissioner. On behalf of the EPP Group, el señor Zoido.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, President. Vice President, in 1903, the New York Times said that airplanes were unnecessary inventions, and they would take, millions of years before they became a reality. But then the Wright brothers managed to launch the first flight in history. Then a few years later, the air attack on Pearl Harbor made it clear that airplanes were not just a reality. No, they were a decisive factor which would determine who wins the wars of the 20th century, or who won the wars of the 20th century. Well, now we're in the 21st century with drones, and Ukraine is a dramatic example of this. According to many analysts, more than 70% of deaths in the war in Ukraine have been caused by drones. But the impact is not limited to the battlefield. We've seen Russian drones also affecting European infrastructure and interrupting traffic in our airports. Therefore, Europe needs to respond urgently to this threat. Industrial projects that are being developed, such as Eurodrone, are falling behind, and we need to see a European drone war. And this, what will be announced next week, is actually a good thing. Vice President, we need to speed up and scale up. Ukraine is able to produce more than 5 million drones a year, but in the EU we don't even reach 10% of that figure. We Europeans have a lot to learn about the drone industry in Ukraine, with more investment in innovation, with much more robust supply chains, and with permanent coordination between industry and armed forces. Ukraine, in 2022, experienced its own Pearl Harbor, involving drones in this case. We need to ensure that the European Union advances in this regard, and that is what we are suggesting in this report that we're approving today. Thank you.
On behalf of the S&D Group, Mr. Maniatis.
Chair, the drones and the anti-drone systems are a constituent part of the defense of the member states. Unfortunately, the European Union has stayed behind in this crucial area. The recent overflights over airports and energy and military infrastructure and installations in some member states showed our weaknesses. Now, the report that we're submitting has as its aim to have a complete plan in order to face this gap. We have to move directly in developing the capabilities and the incorporation of the capabilities in our defense dogmas, but also in the plans for civil protection of the member states. We should use methodically the lessons from Ukraine, and Ukraine is an example to imitate. Furthermore, we cannot ignore the strategic danger of the dependence from non-European sources for spare parts and raw materials. We have to support an autonomous industry in Europe for drones, and also to have the supply chains and support the production in the European Union is a very important issue for sovereignty and security. Thank you.
On behalf of the PFE Group, Monsieur Tironi.
Chers collègues, ladies and gentlemen, certain innovations in the military field are more than just examples of technology supporting our armies. They actually call for deep-rooted reform of a whole vision of security. This applies to drones and to the contrary, which is the fight against drones. This Commission report makes it clear we haven't sufficiently taken on board the changes which drones imply. This is demonstrated clearly by the way in which our countries are powerless when drones overfly airports and other critical infrastructure. Over and beyond the battle for European industry, drones can actually be a tool for massive paralysis. This is why it's so important that we rethink the way we defend our territory, ensure we have robust defence systems, while modifying legislation to ensure that we can fight against drones. Whenever the environment makes it possible, it should be possible for us to either scramble the signals to or shoot down drones without red tape. Our armies and defence industries must be in a position to produce in massive quantities cheap drones. This is the future of air defences, working together with high-performance arms, with low-cost co-capabilities where we can actually keep the cost down. Rapporteur, thank you for encouraging people to recognise the importance of this global new phenomenon, drones.
On behalf of the ECR Group, Mr. Dvorczyk.
President, members of the House, The full-scale Russian aggression on Ukraine has radically changed the way we see security and the battlefield. Given that challenge, the EU countries have to look at three key challenges. First of all, building a sovereign industrial ecosystem. Our dependence on components from China for UAS is a problem. It's short-sightedness. Without a supply chain, we can't guarantee our security or autonomous production. We have to move production onto European territory and reinforce dual-use projects so that civil innovation can improve our military capacities. Next, adaptation. The current battlefield means that we need to radically change our systems so they can work more quickly. At the moment, European procedures function according to a rationale that belongs in a previous time. We need to speed things up. We need a way for private capital and startup to work on technologies that we'll need in the future. And thirdly, convergence of critical infrastructure. Drones go across the demarcation lines between these. We need command and control that's coordinated. Our critical infrastructure has to have a drone shield around it. If Europe wants to be safe, then we have to be technologically independent and prepared for a new generational war. Let's use the Ukrainian experience in order to build a credible and effective deterrent capacity. Thank you.
My next speaker on behalf of the Renew Group, Madame Boutmans.
Commissaris. Commissioner, ladies and gentlemen. We've already heard it. Europe has to start speeding up immediately. Drones are the troops of the future. That's quite clear. Just look at what's happening in Ukraine, the way that drones are being used. These tiny machines can actually cause enormous damage. Look at the way in which drones are able to bring our airports to a standstill. That's happened to Brussels Airport. They can be used to spy on our troops. So we have to better understand the growing hybrid threat. Colleagues, what's even more dangerous is the fact that 60% of the components we need come from the US and China, making us dependent on them. And anybody who's dependent is, of course, vulnerable. If Europe is to be prepared for the future, we have to ensure that we can work more quickly and more effectively. This report puts forward three important proposals. First of all, Europe must build its own drone industry. We have the know-how, we have the industry. 80% of our drone businesses means that we have subject to chaotic rules, too many rules. We have to ensure that we can speed up the approvals process. Let's cut red tape. We've just heard that Ukraine can produce 5 million drones a year. They've got the know-how and the ability to do that. In Ukraine, they've recognized the dual use and importance of drones. Drones are also important for civilian use. In my own town, St. Truida in Belgium, we're looking into creating a drone port. We think that drones can be an important part of future transport infrastructure. And finally, a European drone shield is essential. This is an overriding priority, and we must get down to work on it immediately.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner, dear colleagues, I'm going to speak in Danish. I den aktuelle geopolitiske situation er det...
In this geopolitical situation, we have to be able to supply ourselves. We must be independent of the US and China. China delivers 60% of components for drones today. We have to remember that drones are crucial to modern warfare, and we see that in Ukraine very clearly. So we need to build up a European drone production in a close cooperation with the Ukrainians, because they are the leaders here. Apart from military, we need to ensure that drones can be used for civil purposes and protect us. So we have to invest in anti-drone capacities so we're better able to fight hybrid attacks, like the ones we've seen at European airports. We need much more cooperation across Europe and much more standardization of our production. All of this is included in this report. That's why it's important, and I'm sure it will lead to concrete action. Thank you to the rapporteur for good cooperation.
Dear colleague, on behalf of the left, Madame Monsieur.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, President. Colleagues, I am extremely disappointed. This report does pursue a legitimate objective, sovereignty for Europeans based on drones. We need a clear and ambitious roadmap for that in order to be able to use this technology in a fully autonomous manner. But every 4 paragraphs there's a reference to NATO. It is 78 times in total. This autonomy makes us more dependent on an organization controlled by the United States. And we've seen threats from Donald Trump against a member state of the European Union in recent weeks. And we would have secrets about our drones reaching the United States, for example. So this constant reference to NATO would remain in defense. Our regulations won't protect us. They will weaken us. And so, then in this text, when it deals with civilian drones, well, it's not enough either, because we have tabled amendments. This technology could be used to combat fires and other forms. But then, what about Frontex? It could be used to track migrants, for example. This is what the far right want to see. We defend a different vision, that is European security, which is not dependent on NATO, which is based on our sovereignty for the common good and for everybody's security.
Merci, Madame. On behalf of the ESN group, Mr. Newhoff.
Meine Damen und Herren.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Posnak's drone report includes some extremely good expert knowledge. However, it doesn't actually address the threat that we're faced with. Let's be clear that we have a real wreck of our security policy in Europe. For decades, we have thought that being an economic power would be enough to create geopolitical influence. But only if you have your own military capacity can you guarantee and be effective in security policy matters. As such, our own European industrial base is the right way to go, and the AFD and the ESN will support that. Security policy novelties require an evaluation before they go forward. As you know, in security policy, we look at risks and threats and distinguish between the two. A threat is when the aggressor has both the intention and the capacity to harm another party. NATO members in Europe are not being threatened at the moment. That's the only answer we can give to that question. Not by Russia, regardless however often this nonsense is repeated. Russia has neither the intention nor the capacity to successfully attack a NATO member or take them over. The Russian forces haven't managed to take Donbass in the last 4 years, even though that is the declared goal of the Russian leadership. Russians in Paris, Russians in Berlin, do you really believe that's going to happen, Mrs. Strack-Zimmerman? And why? Does Russia need more land? Does Russia need rare earths from Europe? Colleagues, this is an absurd scenario which is being used to intimidate our populations, push them to subservience. And it's far from reality as well. You might as well say that we could push the Russian forces back to the borders of 1991. Yesterday we heard here that Russians' defeat in Ukraine would be the most cost-effective and effective investment in European security. Well, that is an absolutely wrong forecast for security policy. The AfD and the ESN want security policy that is based on reality. Clausewitz, in his work on war, said that political and moral forces define success in battle, and particularly the will of the society behind one of the forces. And that just comes from statements made by self-satisfied politicians, but rather when people know who they're defending and what they're supposed to be defending. Europe that denies its borders, Europe that accepts mass illegal immigration, Europe that is just watching Islamification without stopping it, Europe whose elites are threatening freedom of speech, a Europe whose young people are pushing out rainbow propaganda rather than love of their homeland, Europe that is being eaten up by fatigue of itself, is not a Europe is going to create a population that wants to fight for its own survival. A survey in Germany said that only a small percentage of people would be ready to support the German army. 59 said no. At the Munich Security Conference, Minister Baer said very clearly that the biggest threat to Europe was not Russia or China, but a withdrawal from the fundamental values of Europe itself. Colleagues, whilst the political elite in Europe, and that includes us here in the Parliament, deny our own culture, then young people will not be ready to defend Europe. We have to know what we're fighting for, and only then we'll be able to build up the military capacity that Mr. Posnax has so impressively listed in his report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Neuhoff. Now we jump in the second part of the debate. My first speaker is el señor De Meo.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you, President. When we say the world has changed, we have to start by recognizing that the types of menaces have changed and the consequences for our security. The war in Ukraine and the presence of drones unimpeded in our skies shows that we have to change the way we operate. Today, unmanned vehicles can enable us to monitor airspace, to survey critical infrastructure, data centers, etc. So we should be able to respond quickly in this emergency situation. To do this, we have to have an industrial policy which is strong and powerful, enable us to reinforce our strategic autonomy and to develop dual-use technology, used both by defence and civil protection. In today's world, the European Union can't allow itself just to follow change. We have to initiate it. We have to integrate have a more integrated air defence, bringing on board military and civilian technology. Europe has to remain faithful to its values and recognise that the world is changing.
Mi siguiente orador es el señor Cepeda.
Mr. Cepeda is next. You have the floor.
Muchas gracias, querido.
Thank you very much, President, dear friend, Commissioner. Europe is at war. We have trade wars, we have kinetic warfare, we have hybrid war as well. But the reality is, it's good to look at space in this report. If we think about kinetic warfare in trenches in the past, now we think of wars like Star Wars, where we're using drones. It's also important to look at the cost of drones. Russian drones, kamikaze shell drones, cost $50,000. The Jabera ones are even more expensive, and the new European drones cost tens of thousands of euros. We need to really reach that level because it's vital to think about a whole network. Europe does not have that. We need to look to the future, look to satellites, know exactly what to develop and where to develop with preparedness, be proactive on that, because that is what will give us effective, powerful coverage for the drone system we need to implement. Our security is at risk, and Europe needs to make an effort to protect all of its citizens. Thank you.
My next speaker is Mr. Vistisen.
Her snart 3 år efter.
Almost 3 years after the full-scale invasion of Ukraine by Russia, the world has seen how cheap drone technology has been able to change the battlefield completely. Still, it feels as if we, in the EU and in NATO, have been sleeping through this. When we see drone incursions, we've reacted by sending very expensive fighter jets into the air so they could shoot down drones with missiles that are thousands of euros, even millions, for just one action, or like we saw in Denmark, in Copenhagen and in other places, where months after we closed our airspace, we couldn't even explain how we would have fought the drones if we had detected them on time. We were caught out. We cannot, year after year, in our continent, look at cheap military technology and see how that changes the strategic landscape completely without being able to react quickly and effectively. One of the biggest weaknesses the war in Ukraine has shown about Europe is that our market is not adaptive. They're not able to deliver on military capacity build-up so we could deliver the weapons to Ukraine and be able to defend ourselves at the same time. That has to stop now. That's why we need now to act. Thank you.
Mr. Ciccioli.
I droni e I nuovi sistemi di guerra non sono tecnologie.
Drones and new warfare technology are not future technologies. They're already at the very heart of current conflicts in Ukraine and the Middle East. Those actors who can control their airspace have a strategic advantage. We have to integrate drones, cyber systems, and artificial intelligence. Recent conflicts have given us a clear message. Drones have brought down the cost of war. They've increased lethality. They've made even major powers vulnerable. But they've also enabled offensive forces to reduce losses. Drones can be used to attack armoured vehicles, to attack critical infrastructure, to paralyse an airport or a military base. This means deterrence requires drones. Europe is vulnerable because of our technological dependency on other powers, but also because of a lack of capacity for military intelligence. We have to step up our act. We have to ensure that anti-drone technology become part of our industrial strategy. When it comes to control of the drones, humans must remain at the centre. If Europe imposes rigid values, while other actors show a lack of values, we will be in a difficult situation. The time has come for us to be pragmatic rather than ideological.
Madam Char.
Thank you, colleagues. What we have ahead of us is a great strategy that is supposed to prepare the EU for drone threats. I don't need to assure you that I certainly support this strategy. We need it to be ambitious, especially at times when we talk about the destruction or that the transatlantic security is being shaken in its foundations. But the problem is elsewhere. For instance, in Slovakia, our government, the defense minister, when discussing drones, he refuses to even mention the Russian threat, and he's apparently not the only one. Ideally, he would like to ensure the anti-drone protection using his friends and business deals for them without the EU interfering. I would like to assure our European partners that Slovakia or Hungary, we are not our prime ministers, we are not Fico, we are not Orban. When these governments are out of office, we will be prepared to join the European defense, the anti-drone wars. We have great companies, great experts. Don't turn away from Slovakia and other countries, because Slovaks do not want to be a black hole of Europe and certainly not a hole in European defense. Thank you.
Madam. Mr. Stakis.
Dear colleagues, drones are no future technology. We need them today for the defense capacity and for the civil security as well. What we see that Russia attacks us with drones, it attacks our infrastructure, and in order to paralyze airports, it is very easy to use. We have to be able to react quickly and effectively. Latvia is a very good example how a very small country can become a major country in drone capacity. We, with our allies, have created a drone coalition, and we already provide Ukraine with hundreds of thousands of drones and €1 billion financing. We use these investments to afterwards provide benefit for all Europe. There are in Latvia produced anti-drone technologies that are then exported to the whole of EU, and Belgium, for example, benefits from that. Latvia also provides for the biggest drone testing infrastructure in one of our regions. We have created a drone center where new technologies are tested together with scientists on the basis of the experience in Ukraine, and is one of the examples of the possibilities Europe can enjoy. We have to develop our own drone capacity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear colleague. Mr. Tovary.
President, Commissioner, dear colleagues, drones are not a silver bullet that will win wars or solve our defense issues, but they are here to stay, creating both threats and possibilities to our security and defense. Therefore, we need to be much better in developing them, producing them, using them, and also countering them. But as this report tells us, we have one big problem in this, and it is China. China is a major producer of drone components and materials, and it is using its position to control the markets. At the same time, China is supporting Russia's war industry and helps Russia to produce drones and missiles that are used to kill and maim Ukrainian soldiers and civilians. We need to get rid of this dependence on Chinese products so that we can't be blackmailed, and we need to sanction Chinese and other countries' companies and actors supporting Russia's illegal war in Ukraine. This will help Ukraine's defense and also win time for us when we are building our own capabilities. And we need to remember that even though Russia is currently not able to seriously threaten Europe, Putin's will to do so has not gone away. Therefore, we need to build European counter-UAV capabilities against future Russian threats as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pikula.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Madam Commissioner. Nowadays, drones have become most critical weapons in modern warfare. In a brutal aggression of Russia on Ukraine, they now account for nearly 3/4 of recent casualties. Drone warfare is therefore a fundamental transformation of how wars are fought and the challenge for the EU to adapt its defense capabilities. We need to learn lessons from that, and we must strengthen our cooperation with Ukraine to learn best practices. Unfortunately, drones have also been used recently as very dangerous provocations, violating airspace of several EU member states and causing a lot of damages. This method of undermining the European Union goes hand in hand with hybrid threats, disinformation and interference. Therefore, it's a must to expand our counter-drone capabilities, particularly by investing in training and operational expertise, as well as adapting to new challenges. The absolute necessity needs to be to protect our critical and vulnerable infrastructure while boosting resilience. Thank you.
Thank you, dear colleague, Mr. Nikolic. Monsieur.
2 months ago, the Chief of Staff in France, Mr. Mondon, with Mr. Macron's support, said that we had to accept losing our children to go to war. It's a shocking statement, but it shows a lack of foresight about what the war in the future will look like. A tank for millions can be destroyed by a drone that costs just 1,000. Thousands of soldiers are dying under a rain of grenades dropped by drones. Only poor countries will see their young people die in war. The great powers will fight with drones in order to save lives and to be more effective. Ukraine and Russia have 4 million drones each. China has 8 million, and the US is going to catch up to the tune of 1 million drones per year. We in Europe, in France, ordered only 1,000 last year. The war tomorrow will depend on the number of factories 4.0 we have, not the number of people who shed their blood on the battlefield.
Mr. Coles, you have the floor.
Dear colleagues, first, congratulations to the rapporteur, Reinis Pozniaks, on a strong report. It matters that this is led by a Latvian. On the EU's eastern frontier, capability matters more than intent. My years in the National Guard and in politics have taught me this. Drones matter because they change tempo. Whoever sees first, decides first, and can act first. Ukraine shows that clearly. Speed, iteration, and integration beats perfection. What this report gets right is its focus on systems. Compatibility and interoperability now decide advantage. How well sensors, autonomy, and command connect. Europe has strong technology, but without alignment, multiplied force never become one. Here is the core mission. Agree on common European standards for autonomous and interoperable drone systems first. Architecture before mass production. Software before scale. If we lock in fragmentation, we lock in delay. If we build common systems, capability follows. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear colleague, Madame Kalsprou.
President, Ukraine needs Europe. Even more so, Europe needs Ukraine. Since the full-scale invasion, Ukraine has developed and scaled up an extraordinary drone industry, a cutting-edge expertise in modern warfare, unlike anything we've seen before. In a basement somewhere in Ukraine, I got to witness it myself, a high-tech army of volunteers working tirelessly every day of the week and every hour of the day to construct and repair drones. To face the Russian threat to Europe, we must work together with them. Russia might be bigger, but Ukraine is smarter. Slava Ukraini.
Thank you very much, dear colleague. Mr. Van Lashet, you have the floor.
Dear colleagues, around 10 years ago, Volt was founded. Since then, we've called for a European army. Since then, people have called us naive. Naive when we said that hiding behind the US was not an appropriate defense strategy. But now, Putin's drones fly over Europe, and American noose tightens over Greenland, and NATO is crumbling. And the only naive thing is thinking that we can go without a European army. We don't even have our own command headquarters. Dealing with today's global dangers with yesterday's national armies is like bringing a bayonet to a drone fight. So while I applaud this action plan for European drones, we must do more to be fit for today's security challenges. Replace American generals' software and weapons with European alternatives. Start with the European countries that want to move fast and combine their militaries. Others can join later. And finally, start to build a real European army to defend the United States of Europe. Opinion polls show Europeans want this. So let's not wait for war to unite us. Let's unite to prevent war. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Serva.
Szanowni Państwo.
Ladies and gentlemen, this topic is not an academic one for us. In Poland, this is a real issue that affects our preparedness. On the 9th to 10th of December last year, there was a massive incursion into Polish airspace by drones. Unmanned vehicles are used for a number of tasks and are essential for our armed forces. The report is right to underline UAS capacities, and this activity means strategic partnerships between member states. What the EU is can offer is money. We in Poland want to use the SAFE instrument to its full extent, and as part of that, we will also develop an anti-drone system. So I thank you, Commissioner, for that initiative.
Dear colleague, my next speaker is Mr. Dinku.
Thank you very much. Madam Vice President, colleagues, warfare has changed. Drones have become predominant, and they can be very effective, but we have a critical dependence on external suppliers for semiconductors, for batteries. Our rules are much slower than technology. The Parliament needs to do several things. We need to have a joint procurement at European level, which is swift and interoperable. And we also need to have clear rules when it comes to military intelligence. It's about speed. It's about our coordination, our ability to be able to react quickly, because delays can cost us dear. Over the past few years in Europe, the European Commission has promoted the European Drone Defence Initiative, and this is about this is part of the 2030 roadmap, and the Eastern Flank Watch as well. These concepts are being devised, but they need to become operational now.
Monsieur le Président, chers collègues.
President, ladies and gentlemen, the war in Ukraine has settled the debate. Drones are a central part of modern warfare. Cheap, effective, decisive. This, however, should not act as a pretext to bring back to life an old illusion, the idea of European defence. We are opposed to that. Defence is a national power, using their armies and based on their sovereignty. However, it's essential that we invest in research and production of drones for our armies and for defence of our national infrastructure. Europe is currently dependent on foreign powers when it comes to procuring essential military technology. This is a major strategic vulnerability. The response to this is not centralisation in Brussels. The real response is reindustrialisation, support for our SMEs, European priority when it comes to procurement. Sovereignty can't be delegated. It must be built and then defended.
Thank you very much. Mr. Bartluka, you have the floor.
Thank you, dear colleagues. Modern warfare is rapidly changing, and Europe must adapt. Croatia can serve as an example in many aspects. We need to stress that we have a large experience in conducting warfare because Serbia imposed war on us in the 90s. And here we learned to use drones. During the Homeland War, despite the embargo and the lack of resources, we devised improvised UAVs to guide our cannons. And these experiences have served to plan military operations. Croatia had a different situation than Ukraine nowadays, not only because of the embargo, but also other circumstances. But we emerged as victors, and we have to act like victors.
You have the floor.
Thank you, President, Commissioner and colleagues. I very much agree with the sentiments of this report and the statements of other MEPs to the effect of the extraordinary changes that drone technology has had on security and defence policy, but also on wider industry. And our own capacity here in the European Union is being constantly tested. At least 10 countries have detected drones near airports and military units. The suspect, of course, is an imperialist Kremlin that believes that Europe is unprepared. In my own country, as we prepare for the assumption of the presidency later this year, the ability to counter drone incursion takes on urgency. Ireland has already seen suspected Russian drone activity in the vicinity of Dublin Airport during President Zelensky's visit to Ireland in December of last year. It is entirely reasonable to expect this to increase as Ireland hosts world leaders during the presidency in the second half of the year. I very much welcome EU support for dual-use technology through EU financial instruments and urge the Irish Government to make the necessary legislative changes that would allow a whole-of-government approach to invest in and support for such technology. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear colleague. Mr. Becky, you have the floor.
Goedemorgen, mevrouw de commissaris.
Good morning, Commissioner. President, ladies and gentlemen, drones and counter-drone technology are no longer something in the vague future. They are an essential component of our defence and of our economy. As is the case with other innovative sectors, however, we face the same barriers: too little access to financing, too many rules, and a lack of space for growth. Europe cannot slow down innovation through red tape or administrative burdens. We have to try to become world leaders. We shouldn't be trying to reinvent the wheel. In Ukraine, the battle is taking place in terrible conditions, and the war is based on drones. We have to translate that experience into European innovation and technology. We should also play to our own strengths. Flanders, my own region, Limburg, are absolute European leaders when it comes to drone innovation. We have an existing ecosystem. It's there. We should try to build on that, showing ambition, trust, and decisiveness. Only in this way can we help promote top-level European technology for both military and civil and dual-use purposes.
Mr. Mavridis, you have the floor.
Congratulations to the rapporteur and the shadow rapporteurs, our colleagues. Geopolitical developments, technology, and the experience of Ukraine make the use of drones as a definitive means in the modern war of hybrid attacks and conflicts. Recent attacks against member states with drones, from Russia to Poland, up to the occupying forces of Turkey in Cyprus, showed our weakness. Our weakness needs to make us adapt our defense industry in order to protect our borders and our citizens. We have to support the European industry, and we have to stop our dependence from external factors. Already, the European SMEs are occupied in this sector, and with certainty, I know that in my country, in Cyprus, this is taking place. But we have to support, through simplification of the procedures, these companies to have more easy financing and cooperation between big and smaller companies from different member states. We need a defense Europe, a defense of Europe with a defense industry. Thank you.
Madame Fouret.
Drones and new warfare systems have transformed conflicts. They're quick, cheap, autonomous, and can strike strategic targets. The EU should adapt, must adapt, but that should not be a political pretext. Under the cover of security, the Commission is pushing for federalised defence, with more and more programmes and funds without any clear basis in the treaties for them. But the treaties are very clear. Defence is in the national remit, part of national sovereignty. The Commission has no democratic legitimacy nor operational responsibility for military operations or the life of our soldiers. Yes to technological cooperation, yes to innovation in drones and UA and defence systems, but no to a European army de facto created without any mandate from the people. European security is based on responsible and strong nations, but not some sort of military centralisation in Brussels.
Mr. Terhes, you have the floor.
Dear colleagues, the European Parliament's report on drones and new systems of warfare rightfully points that unmanned systems have fundamentally changed modern combat. Drones are now decisive force multipliers, providing reconnaissance, precision strikes, logistics, and electronic warfare, as demonstrated every day in Ukraine. Europe must lead in this critical field. Therefore, first, we must invest strategically in drone technology and build strong industrial and operational capacities within the European Union. This includes reducing dependence on external suppliers for key components, as well as removing unnecessary bureaucracy that slows innovation, procurement, production, and deployment. Second, we must deepen our cooperation with Ukraine. Ukrainian engineers, manufacturers, and operators have gained unmatched experience in developing, deploying, and scale drone systems under real combat conditions. Third, drones must be fully integrated in our defense structures alongside effective counter-drone systems. To achieve this, we must prioritize funding, streamline production, and scale production. Europe must build not only the best drones, but also be able to produce them quickly and in large numbers to ensure our security and deter any aggressor. Thank you.
Thank you, dear colleague. Madame Kulmuni.
Arvoisa herra puhemies, tosiasian...
Thank you, President. It's a fact that every member state needs to be prepared for these hybrid attacks and violations of sovereignty and drone attacks. The Russian border has a very important role. It's 1,343 kilometers with Finland. And all sectors need to play a key role. We depend on China and the United States, and we know that that's simply not sustainable. Preparedness is very important, and this needs to be understood across Europe. Reliability comes to raw materials, infrastructure, storage, expertise, innovation, use, and also as responding to drone attacks. We also need skills in administration as well, and this needs to be in all member states, and we need to have close cooperation with Ukraine and NATO.
Madame Teodorescu-Mavi.
Tack talman. Vi befinner oss i ett paradigmskifte som förändrar slagfältet i grunden.
Thank you, President. We've seen these enormous changes on the battlefield. The art of war has been radically changed because of the use of drones. Change similar in its impact to the arrival of rifles and others. Every year, Ukraine used millions of drones to beat off Russian attacks. Hundreds of millions of drones have been produced in the country. This demonstrates that military technology can be rolled out in real time. So we can't accurately predict future changes, but what we can do is ensure that we have sufficient access to the components we need so as to ensure that we can roll out massive production, providing drones both for the Ukrainians and for ourselves. Our military capacity must be set up before war breaks out, before these threats come true. For tomorrow's battlefields, our determination alone won't be enough. We need to ensure that we step up our industrial production. We must hone our resistance, and we have to start doing that today.
Arvoisa puhemies, Ukraina.
Thank you very much, President. The war in Ukraine has shown starkly just how warfare has changed. Drones are no longer the technology of the future. They are reality of today. They affect the battlefield, civilian safety, and defence capabilities of Europe as a whole. The European Union needs to take this development very seriously. We need to bolster our own expertise quickly, and we need to bolster our own defence capabilities as well. We need to have resources for countering drones where the threats are greatest, especially on the eastern border of the European Union. This report is an important step towards a common vision in Europe. European security cannot be outsourced. We need to be able to protect ourselves, our citizens, our values, and peace in Europe. Thank you.
Dear colleague, Madame Tissot.
President, members of the House. Drones have become the weapon of mass destruction of the 21st century. They're cheap, mass-produced and deadly. Ukraine has removed any illusions in that respect. For Poland and other countries on the eastern border of the EU, the Russian drone attacks and the violation of our EU airspace are not one-off cases. They're part of a hybrid war against the EU and NATO. Article 42, Para 7 of the treaty can only have any meaning if it's translated into real military capacity. Solidarity on paper won't stop drones flying in the direction of hospitals and power stations. So Europe needs a European drone shield, integrated, layered, working in real time, capable of detection, disruption, interception, and defence of civilians. We have to reinforce the defence of the eastern border of the EU. Safe money is essential because either we arm up or the Kremlin will come for more.
La señora Sofko.
Coming back to a previous speech, I read you an article of Newsweek many years ago. At a secluded military base on Croatia's Adriatic coast, an unpiloted CA plane rolled down the runway, then climbed slowly over tall pine trees and headed into hostile airspace. It was July 1995 and the new conflict was brewing. Serbian leader Slobodan Milosevic has conquered Croatia's Krajina border zone with Bosnia in 1991, and now Croatia was preparing a lightning assault to get it back. Americans in military uniform operating from a cream-colored trailer near the runway directed drone to photograph Serb troops' position and weapons emplacement. According to top Croat intelligence officials, copies were also sent to the headquarters of the Croatian general in command of Operation Storms. We now understand why we need drones, and we need the drone wall. On the eastern flank, on the western flank, we should also involve willing Western Balkan partners in the drone wall project. We have to protect our borders. We also have to thank our American partners who were helping us with their technology at the time. And we have to keep fighting in Ukraine and in all these endangered borders alliance where Europeans are facing, together with our transatlantic partners, a menace of actual dictators. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam. Mr. Tonin, you have the floor.
Dear President, dear colleagues, the war we are witnessing today is not a technological revolution, it is a structural one. Drones have transformed the battlefield into a permanent zone of exposure where movement, logistics, and even survival are constantly contested. But one lesson from Ukraine is clear. Drones do not replace traditionally military capabilities. They reshape it. Drones are a powerful force multiplier for artillery, air defense, armor, or mass. At the same time, we must be aware that over-reliance on drones without the resilience and traditionally military capabilities creates dangerous vulnerabilities. This is where Europe must act, not by chasing individual technologies, but by building integrated systems, by ensuring that European industry sustains potential war efforts. War has changed. Scale and cooperation now decide about our survival. Europe must adapt now, or we will be defeated in the future.
Thank you very much, dear friend. Mr. Terras, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Dear colleagues, Russian war of aggression against Ukraine has changed the battlefield permanently. We have witnessed incredible fast development of the field of the drone warfare. This applies both offensive and defensive measures. Drone warfare means also more challenges and tasks for the European Union. Our ultimate goal is to protect our people. To achieve this, we must be prepared both doctrinally and technologically. Drone warfare is yet another area where we are lagging far behind in the terms of competitiveness. I am convinced that when it comes to the drone countermeasures, we should proceed from the principle of so-called technological neutrality and develop all capabilities, both electronic and kinetic, which, when combined, will provide more effective drone defense. The EU should launch its drone defense through pilot projects, first involving member states bordering Russia. Acting on the smaller scale and faster will certainly help validate larger projects and contribute to overall defence of Europe. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, dear friend, Señor Sousa Silva.
Senhor Presidente, Senhora Comissária, caros colegas.
Commissioner, colleagues, drones today represent a complete change in defence. Ukraine has shown through its use at this decisive moment in the battlefield, and this has accelerated innovation cycles. Europe needs to keep pace with this, with clear rules and investment. There is a realistic way to create technology clusters, skilled jobs, and European value chains involving SMEs and startups at all times. This is a clearly dual-use sector. Defence, yes, but also civil protection to combat fires, search and rescue operations, maritime operations, and also border control. Investing in drones means investing in our resilience, our defence, our competitiveness, but above all, in our sovereignty. Thank you.
Tengo dos peticiones de Catch the Eye.
I have two requests under Catch the Eye. The first is for Juan Fernando López Aguilar, my friend.
Presidente Pons. Thank you, President. Commissioner Minsato, this is a very important debate. We talk about speeding up development of the European drone industry. There are three ideas I'll share with you. First of all, it is indeed essential that we accelerate work to create this European anti-drone wall. Even more important, though, is identifying the threats. We've seen the way in which airports can be brought to a standstill by just one drone. We don't know who is doing this. Was it a state actor, Russia, a non-state actor, a criminal gang, or just some reckless private individual? Next, it's important to stress the need to allocate capabilities. We have 27 member states which are very different. We can't all invest the same amount. It's important that each member state do what it's best at, so as to ensure that we can work together to strengthen the European drone industry. Thirdly, we're not just talking about the military defensive uses of this technology. Clearly, the European Parliament has shown in recent months that it's obsessed by defence. However, we should also be focusing on the civil and dual uses of drones to protect our population. Promoting the defence industry cannot come at the expense of cohesion, regional policy, and other policy areas which characterise the European Union. Thank you.
Thank you very much, President, and thank you, Commissioner Manzatu. If the European Union truly wants to lead in drone technology, we must be prepared to invest in it strategically and on a large scale. Drones are no longer niche tools, but essential technologies. Yes, they play a vital role in military defence, but they are equally essential for search and rescue missions, for policing our coastlines, against drug and human trafficking, for mapping, for agriculture, and for many of the everyday tasks that are necessary for Europe's security and resilience. Ireland is already at the forefront of this innovation. In Cork, ICP Newtech is producing advanced bomb disposal and firefighting drones. In Shannon, ATEC SIN is developing drones for surveillance, mapping and other critical issues. Our regional airports, especially Waterford Airport, are uniquely positioned to partner with our technological universities such as CETU in Ireland South to drive cutting-edge research and development. Thank you.
Commissioner Minsato, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you for the very valuable debate, for your contributions. It is important to reiterate that drones and drone defense are the top priority of the Commission, clearly also of the Parliament. On my side, because my portfolio is connected with the work on our defense industry, it's important to note that designing a defense industry that takes value or that extracts the value from our European talents, from our students' education, from our STEM education, the skills, creating jobs, high-quality jobs related to this field is extremely important, because in the end we want an industry that is not fragmented, that is efficient, that is able to scale, but all that is dependent, of course, on the professionals, on the talent, on those that work in this topic. So I invite you, of course, to support with your vote this report later today, and all other topics related can be replied by my colleagues from the Commission that have been raised in the debate today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, dear Commissioner. The reporter, Mr. Pozniak, you have the last floor.
Yeah, thank you very much. I will just use this opportunity to say thank you all for input, and thank you, Commissioner, for input in today's debates. I'm glad to hear that almost all of us are on the same page about this issue and the importance of this issue, and we all basically agreed that our biggest challenge is speed. So after later today, when this report, I hope, will be approved, nothing ends with that. It's actually will be the start, and we will need to push Commission to implement all this strategy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this and for your work. The debate is closed. The vote will be held today. Next item on the agenda is oral question to the Commission, a new action plan to implement the European Pillar of Social Rights. And the author is Madame Anderson. You have the floor.
Mr. President, Executive Vice President, and dear colleagues, we are living in a time of uncertainty, geopolitical instability, the green and digital transitions, and deep demographic change are reshaping our societies and economies in unprecedented ways. This changing environment affects how we learn, how we work, how we live, and crucially, who benefits and who is left behind. Our labor markets, education and training, and social protection systems are under pressure. And while we can acknowledge that progress has been made towards the 2030 employment target, we must also be honest, progress on poverty reduction and training is far too slow. Inequalities between member states, regions, and social groups are widening, not narrowing. And this is a huge problem for people, societies, and the economy as well. These challenges do not affect everyone in the same way. Some groups are disproportionately exposed to job insecurity, low-quality work, skills mismatches, and poverty. Young people not in education, employment, or training, Roma communities, people with disabilities, older workers, single parents, and many others still face structural barriers to accessing quality jobs and decent livelihoods. And this is happening at the very moment when employers in many countries across Europe report growing labor and skills shortages. Against this background, Parliament would like to ask the Commission how it intends to respond in a way that is ambitious enough, coherent, and socially just. First, on access to labor markets and quality jobs. How will the Commission address the unequal social impact of the green and digital transitions in the new European Pillar of Social Rights Action Plan? How will it ensure that these transitions become a pathway to inclusion? Second, on working conditions and labor mobility. Fair labor mobility and decent working conditions are essential for a functioning internal market and for social cohesion. Yet too many workers still face exploitation, insecurity, and unequal treatment. What measures does the Commission envisage to ensure fair labor mobility and decent working conditions for all? Third, on homelessness and housing. Homelessness is one of the most extreme forms of social exclusion, and it is rising in many member states. This is unacceptable in a union that claims to put people at its center. How will the Commission combat homelessness and intend to honor its political commitment to end homelessness by 2030 through the European Affordable Housing Plan and beyond? And fourth, on financing and governance. None of these objectives can be achieved without adequate, stable and predictable funding. How will the Commission ensure consistent and sufficient financial resources to deliver on the objectives of the European Pillar of Social Rights in the context of the next multi-annual financial framework and its proposed new structure? Will social conditionalities for EU funding be strengthened and effectively enforced? And what methodology will the Commission use to track national social spending under the next MFF so that commitments translate into real investment in people? I will close by saying that in the committee's view, the new action plan to implement the European Pillar of Social Rights must not become a catalogue of good intentions. It must be a plan for concrete action backed by legislation, by funding and by accountability. The European social model must continue to be at the heart of the European project, and the Parliament expects clear answers, concrete measures and a credible timeline. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Madam Anderson. Commissioner Minsatu.
Thank you, honorable members. I would like to thank this House for the oral question that you adopted in December on the European Pillar of Social Rights Action Plan. It gives an important opportunity to us that we take stock of where we are so far in the mandate and what is yet to come. A large number of policies, of measures and legislation and guidance have been agreed since the Pillar Action Plan was adopted in March of 2021. So the tools and the instruction manual are ready. But now we have to be vigilant in making sure that the fair, inclusive and resilient social Europe that we want and that we need continues to be actually built. The 2021 Action Plan shows results. Progress has been recorded. However, we need to do more. We need to do better and we need to do faster in some areas. Therefore, the full implementation of the 2021 Action Plan remains an imperative. Some people might believe that the commitments made 5 years ago to strengthen labour rights and social protections in the European Union are no longer a priority, with global developments and the associated more pressing matters always on our doorstep. But I believe that the opposite must be true. If we want to increase our resilience and our competitiveness, and I've said it numerous times, Europe needs to embrace even more tightly the values on which it was built, of equality, of fairness, and of opportunity. Last year, the Commission carried out a review of the 2021 Action Plan to understand what has worked well, if there are gaps, and where future possibilities and priorities should lie. We are currently analysing the results and finalising this review. While the impacts on the ground of the Action Plan are unfolding, the feedback we received confirms the importance and the relevance of our pillar. Meanwhile, we have adopted during this mandate a number of key initiatives. In December, we adopted the Quality Jobs Roadmap, giving a clear message that every job in Europe must be a quality job. That is how we attract talent, that is how we reduce in-work poverty, and that is how we strengthen Europe's competitiveness. This includes ensuring that people furthest from the labour market can be brought back in helping address both social cohesion and labour shortages. The Union of Skills that we presented earlier in